All right. So we're deep into this series, Faithful, and so glad that you have joined in. If you are staying for Engage after this, that will happen in the next auditorium over from here. And if you don't know what Engage is, stay for lunch. You'll find out. It'll be good. We would love to have you. So in this series, we've been talking about, what are some things that God uses over and over and over again that kind of just he uses to blow up our faith in a really, really good way. Because if we know what those are, then we can kind of program around that. We can structure around that. We can use that in a way that is helpful for people. And so that is something that we want to be able to do. And today, last week we talked about, Jesus' invitation to us to follow me, And Jesus just says, hey, I want to invite you to follow me. And it's the same invitation to his first century followers as it is to us. And that he says, you know what, even before you believe, and it's so interesting to me, reading through this, it's like, gosh, he invited those disciples to follow him before he asked them to believe in him. He said, I want you to follow me, and as you do, maybe you will come to the conclusion that I am who I say I am. And in fact, most of the disciples came to that conclusion that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. They did come to believe in him, but they were following him before they believed in him. And that invitation is extended to you, and it's extended to me as well. And so if you're here today and in-house, or maybe you're watching online, and you would say, I don't know about the whole Jesus thing, I'm not sure about faith, I'm just kind of checking it out. Jesus' invitation, you could begin to follow him before you believe in him. And that would be my challenge to you, is that you would actually begin to follow him. And as you do, I think you may very well come to the conclusion that Jesus' disciples came to, that he is who he said he is. So one of the questions I want us to ask is, what would I do if I woke up every single day confident that God was with me? How would your life be different if every single day you woke up and you realized before the day ever started and that you were absolutely confident, you know what? God is with me today. As I'm getting ready to go to work, God is with me today. As I'm getting ready to go to that event, God is with me today. As I'm getting ready to, do this presentation, God is with me today. As I'm getting ready to do something that, God is with me. How would your life be different if every single day you got up and you were confident, you had faith, the confidence that God was with me today? We've been asking this question as well. What fuels and facilitates the development of active, enduring faith? And active is the word that we've been talking about because faith is a muscle. You're going to either use it and in your exercising of it, it will become stronger and stronger, or it will just atrophy. And over time, it will get weaker and weaker and weaker when you do not use it. And so what are some things that God uses over and over again? And so we've identified 5 of those. Those are certainly not the only 5 that God uses, but those are 5 that we see over and over again in people's faith story. And so we've talked about practical teaching. I grew up in a context that, when I was in my growing up years, we had a church where the pastor was really, really, really good. And, but it was in an era, I should say, that the teaching wasn't real practical. And then I was a part of a lot of churches where, the practical part of the teaching was non-existent. It was like up to you to kind of figure it out. And I've talked to so many people that, that's why they walked away. It was like, I have no idea what in the world the preacher's talking about, and I'm sure it was true. I'm sure it was, it sounded intelligent. I just don't have any idea what that had to do with me. And so after a while, week after week after week of that, you're kind of like, maybe there's just nothing there for me. And so you kind of walk away, And then maybe, it was a pastor, maybe it was, a small group leader, maybe it was a life group leader, maybe it was a men's group, maybe it was a women's group, maybe it was this conference you went to. But whatever it was, all of a sudden this person and one of those people in my life was Reed Tosick, this old cowboy. He opened the Bible and he taught it in a way it was like, yeah, I mean, I could get handles around that. Like, I know what to do with that. And all of a sudden, there was a practicalness to it that was like, man, that has been missing. And I know what to do now with what I'm hearing. And that is so helpful. And as I begin to do that, my faith is really beginning to grow. And so over and over again, I hear about practical teaching. Last week, we talked about personal ministry. And here's what I know about you as adults and what I know about you online as adults. Adults learn on a need-to-know basis. So we can talk until we're blue in the face. And yeah, you might catch a couple of things. And yeah, you might implement a couple of things. But until you really need to know, then you're not going to really grow, right? If you don't put yourself in a place, and I remember the first time I was in high school, I was the president of this youth council that put on rallies. And so as a part of that, I had to lead a devotion. And I remember the first time I was going to be responsible for leading a devotion to my peers and the youth leaders who were in the back of the room. And I just remember going, oh, God, I have no idea what to do here. I'm scared out of my mind. And I'm opening the Bible. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And trying to find something. And you know what? I put myself in a spot where I had to grow. And I needed to know, right? You ever been in that place where you're like, I need to know? And all of a sudden you grow. And guess what else I did? I prayed like crazy, right? It's like the first time you get into a semi and you try to drive a truck for the first time, or you try to drive, I'll never forget this. The first time I drove a truck over a mountain pass, and on the way down that pass, I tell you what, I prayed really, really hard, right? Because I had put myself in a position where I needed to know some things. And I thought I knew, but I had never actually fleshed it out. And so I just hoped I was in the right gear and that Jake brake worked. You know what? But I needed to know. And when you put yourself in personal ministry, all of a sudden you are serving someone else, but you're putting yourself in a position where all of a sudden, man, you need to know. And when you need to know, you begin to grow. So whether that's leading someone in a small group, whether that's teaching someone, whether that's serving children and you're like, oh, whether that's being a teacher, whether that's running sound and tech stuff. And I guarantee you the first time you ever get behind the soundboard and there's people in the room and there's buttons that need to be pushed at all at the right times. And you're like, oh, God, I need your help, right? See, personal ministry. Here's the thing. We are in our nature creatures of comfort. We do not naturally put ourselves in uncomfortable places. We don't like being there. But that's where growth happens. And that's what happens in personal ministry. So when I hear someone's faith story, it was like, yeah, God kept nudging me and nudging me and nudging me. And finally, I'm just like, okay, I'll do that thing. Okay, I'm going to step into that. And when I did, it was like, oh, God grew my faith. Today, I want to talk about providential relationships. Has God ever put someone in your life at just the right time? See, this is some of the things that I hear about providential relationships. When I hear someone's faith story, I am so glad he showed up in my life when he did. I mean, I'm not sure I would have made it through this without her, right? I mean, God put that person in my life at just the right time. I wouldn't be here where I am today apart from them. It's like God dropped them into my life at just the right time. And I would imagine right now you've got some names that have just popped right to the front of your mind, isn't there? There's some people that God has dropped into your life, and maybe you're in a part of your life right now where it's dark and you're seeking and you know what? You're like, is God going to bring someone into my life that's providential that man is going to make some major changes for me? I've had, as I was preparing for this, I was thinking, man alive, I could just go right on down the line. One of the first ones in high school for me was Nan and Leo Sims. I mean, providential. God set them into my life. And here's what's cool, going back to personal ministry, I mean, here's a couple that for 30 years, I have no idea how they did this or why they did this. I'm just glad they did this, but 30 years, they worked with teenagers. I mean, and that was before smoking weed was popular. And they just did it on their own. They chose that on their own. And my brother and I, we always kid about drywallers, because most drywallers smoke weed. I don't know if you know that, but anyway, and I've told my brother, I'm like, well, if I had to do drywall, I would consider it because oh man, drywall is terrible. It's kind of like working with teenagers. And for 30 years, and so they were just unbelievable. And here's what's cool. They would take a vacation from their work in the summertime to spend with teenagers as if they weren't spending enough time with them already on a weekly basis, to spend with them at camp, even when their own kids weren't the age of everyone else going to camp. I mean, personal ministry. And then when they got done with that, they signed up to, they sort of signed up, and then we just wouldn't let them unsign. But they led worship for the first 10 years of the crossing, setting up and tearing down. And see, I always thought as a high schooler, you had a choice. You could either follow God or you could have fun. Those were kind of your two choices, but following God was certainly not, that was going to put the damper on your fun. And fun, you couldn't follow God with a good conscience. And so, when I met Leo taught me that, no, Eric, see, you can have fun and follow God at the same time. You can do that. I was like, really? But I'm Baptist. I can't do that. And so I was like, man alive, that's amazing. That's phenomenal. And so, that providential relationship taught me that, man, I can follow God. And he showed me how to do that. When I got into college, I was kind of in this place where it's like I wanted to go into youth ministry, and so I was going towards that degree. But man alive, in the city, it's like there is a lot of sin over there that looks a lot of fun. And there's a part of me that just really wants to go over there and do that, and yet I want to become a youth pastor. That just seems like two opposite things, and I couldn't reconcile those two things. And there was this war going on inside of me, and I knew if I didn't actually pursue someone in a providential way, that you know what? I was going to make a horrible decision. And so there was this guy that God just dropped into my life, Dr. Carl Lloyd, and I just asked him, would you mentor me? Would you help me? And so he did. And I would not be on this stage if God had not placed that guy in my life. When I had my first youth pastor gig in Salida, Colorado, the lead pastor there was Harold Vance, had an extraordinary impact. God providentially put Harold and Jensen in my life early in our marriage and just mentored us and helped us. In fact, helped us so much. He had such an impact on our life. We named Shane Merritt Vance after Harold. Providential relationship. Had a huge impact in our life. We moved to northern Colorado, and this old cowboy, Reed Tosick, Reed and Kathy, they mentored us along, and Reed was that cowboy that opened the scriptures and would teach it so practically, and I'm just like, oh, it came alive to me in a way that it never had before. Where all of a sudden he would teach it to There was handles on it. And he was such a great mentor and help for Jen and I. When we moved here and we started the church, and we're wanting to have a church that unchurched people love to attend, and we're like, we have no idea how to do that. We don't know exactly what that looks like. We're trying to create something we've never experienced ourselves. I mean, how in the world do we do that? And God brought along and providentially dropped into our lap, North Point Ministries, and that much of what you enjoy and much of what you experience at the Crossing is because of that providential relationship. Speaking of a providential relationship, so interesting, Philip, James, Peter, James, and John, and Philip, they had met Jesus, and they're thinking, this guy could be the Christ. This guy could be the Messiah. I mean, based on what they had seen, and they hadn't seen a lot yet, but based on what they had seen, they're like, this could be the guy. And so Philip is so excited about it. He wants his brother Nathaniel to providentially, meet this guy. And so he wants to introduce him. And so, Philip goes to Nathaniel and says, hey, we think we have found the one Moses talked about, a couple thousand years ago. And Nathaniel's like, right. Yeah, I'm so sure. And Philip's like, And so Nathaniel's like, where's this guy even from? And Philip's like, well, he's from Nazareth. And immediately when he said Nazareth, he was thinking, I should not have said Nazareth, because Nathaniel turns around and he says, Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? I mean, really? And so Philip's like, I shouldn't have said Nazareth. I don't know. So Nathaniel, just come and see. Would you just come and see? Because I think if you would come and see, and I would imagine right now, Nathaniel, if he was here to be able to tell you his story, he was like, talk about providential. And you know what? I almost missed it. Because I was thinking, oh, you know what? I'm setting it aside. One of the primary environments that God uses to set up providential relationships, because here's the thing. As much as we try to program for providential relationships, they're providential. Like we can't force it to happen. You can't force a relationship to happen. They're providential. But you can create environments where it's likely to happen. And so we actually structure things in this way, just saying, God, we don't know who, you want to have a divine appointment with. All we know is this is something you use over and over and over again. So we're going to create an environment where we're going to invite people in, and then we're going to allow you to do what only you can do. And in your divine way, in your providential way, we want you to connect the right people with the right people. The author of Hebrews, he kind of talks about this in Hebrews chapter 10. So if you have your paper Bibles, you can open there. Or if you have your Power Bible, you can power it up and get past Candy Crush and go on to YouVersion. The author of Hebrews in chapter 10, verse 23 says, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope that we affirm. So if we're going to hold tightly, that would be the opposite of holding what? Loosely. Like if I'm going to hold it loose, you're going to lose it. If you don't hold on tight, you're going to lose your grip. And if you don't hold on tight and you lose your grip, and what are we holding on tightly to? This hope that we affirm. And if you don't hold on tightly, what are you going to do? You're going to waver. The author of Hebrews says, hey, guys, there is a way for you not to have to live through your spiritual walk like this, like you're riding a roller coaster. And this is something that I see. It's like you've got to go to, you're a conference to a conference Christian, or a concert to a concert Christian. It's like I have to go to a concert in order for me to get back up on the mountaintop, but then 2 weeks after the concert's gone, you're down in the valley again. I gotta have a conference. I gotta have a concert. And you're like, you're on this roller. And the author is like, no. I mean, concerts are great, But you don't need to live up here and you don't need to live down here. You can actually be consistent. You don't have to waver. There's a way to hold tightly to this hope without wavering. For God can be trusted. Isn't that the issue? Isn't that what we actually question? Can God be trusted? I mean, really, at the crux of why we waver, isn't that what we're asking? Does God really know best? I don't think he does. I don't think he does. And so, you know what? God, thank you very much. I realize you invented everything, you created everything, but I think I know better than you because, I'm watching things and I think I could do it a little bit better. And so when you start going down that path, which all of us go down that path from time to time, don't we? And what happens when we go down that path? We waver. That's what we do, right? And then you crash or you break yourself against the way God's made the world to work. And all of a sudden you're like, you're right, God. You can be trusted over and over and over again. And in these providential relationships that you bring about, I'm brought back to the same conclusion. God can be trusted. And when I believe that God can be trusted, I don't waver near as much. And so when I get into these providential relationships, those are the things God uses over and over and over again that he uses in my life. And get this, maybe you've never thought of this before. Maybe this is the first time this has ever crossed your mind. Do you realize that God wants to use you providentially in someone else's life? Not just, hey, God, would you bring someone into my life? That's great. But you know what Nan and Leo were doing? And I don't know that they even realized that this was what they were doing, but because they were choosing to set themselves in those settings, they were setting themselves up for God to use them providentially in so many young teenagers' lives. And I'm not the only one that would say that was providential. But see, they set themselves up to be that. So it's not just, hey, God, setting someone up to teach me and to mentor me and to help me. It's God wants to use you providentially in someone else's life to teach them, to help them, to walk with them through, and to help them realize God can be trusted to keep his promises. Isn't that incredible? That's so awesome. So he says, let us think of ways to motivate one another. Not just let me think by myself, it's let us, like everyone in the room, you guys watching online, let us together figure out some ways that we can one another in such a way that we motivate each other to believe some stuff? No. To know some stuff? No. To what? To acts of love and good works. In other words, there it comes back again, over and over again, these New Testament writers, and Jesus is going to say, your faith needs to be active. It's not getting together and trying to figure out, you know what, God, I just want to pray that you would do something. And God's over there like, I would love to do something. You want to participate? Not particularly. I just want you to do it. You do it, I'll be over here. And God's like, no, I want to use you in a providential way. And so here it comes back again of saying that it's not just, hey, I'm going to pray on Thursday night prayer group, and all of this stuff happens, but don't ask me to do anything because I don't want to do anything. And God's like, that's not really how it works. Yeah, I want you to pray, and I want you to pray as you go and as you participate, as you are motivated. See, this is providential in that we are motivating one another. You may not even know that you're motivating someone, but by the way that you live and your interest in someone else, when you take an interest in someone else, they are motivated to live like you're living. They feel like you're loving them, and I, in turn, want to do what I am watching you do for me, which is to love and good works. As a result, let us not neglect our meeting together. Like this can't happen if we're not meeting together, if we're not getting together, if we're not gathering together. If you're excluding yourself out of it, then you're not going to be motivated that way. And so let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another. And this happens so many times in a providential way, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Especially now. We live in a difficult world. It's complicated. It's hard. It's not going to get easier. I can guarantee you it's not going to get easier. If there was ever a time when we needed providentially relationships in our lives, both for our benefit and that God would use us providentially in someone else's life, I mean, that's extraordinary. I tell you what, I have been able to experience extraordinary fulfillment in this life. And I was thinking back when Carl Lloyd was mentoring me and helping me, and I would imagine that he got to experience a fulfillment that was just, you know what? He got to set up an individual for success, and he had a part of it. And not only did he have a part of that for one individual, but it had the impact of an entire family trio. It had the impact of an entire direction of my life. When you do that for someone else, yeah, it's one thing to set them up for success, maybe business-wise, and that's great, and you should do that. And maybe you set them up successfully financially, or you set them up successfully in some way that way. But when you intersect with someone on an eternal level, where providentially you went beyond just the business deal, you went beyond just, this immediate world, and you brought in the spiritual aspect of it, and they not only individually were changed, but their family tree was changed for eternity. Can you think of something better than that? Because I don't think there's an amount of money you can place on that would be better. I can't think of stuff that would be better. I can't think of a kitchen that would be better than that. I can't think of a boat that would be better than that. I can't think of a place in the mountains that would be better than that. I can't think of anything that would be more fulfilling than to realize I got to God used me. He chose to use me providentially in someone else's life to change that individual and that family tree for eternity. It doesn't get any better than that. But the best place for that to happen is when we consistently meet together and in the environments that we create where we're gathering together. Because when it comes to your community of faith, proximity matters. It matters. And we love streaming the service, and we love that for you guys. If you're out of town and that allows you to stay connected. And for some of you, you live in a place you can't drive this far, and some of you have health stuff, and so it's such a blessing for you because health-wise you're not able to come. But here's the thing: for those of you that stay home because it's just you would rather be in your PJs and sit back in your couch and drink a cup of coffee and watch. The thing that you miss out on, one of the primary things you miss out on is when you do that, you miss out on God using you in a providential way in someone else's life. And you miss out on someone coming into your life in a providential way to encourage you, to help you, and to spur you on and motivate you to love and good works. So this is something where proximity, it really, really, really does matter. Because people lose faith, and this is something I see all the time. People lose faith when they lose contact with people of faith. See, people drift from their community of faith before they drift away from faith. This is something that I see over and over and over again. You kind of begin to distance yourself from your community of faith. And in the back of your mind, you're like, you're setting them up for failure. It's like, I'm going to back away, and then I'm going to see if they're going to reach out to me. And you're backing away, so these people, they're kind of like, well, they're backing away. I guess, I don't know, maybe they don't want to be apart. And so all of a sudden there's an assumption that begins to happen on both sides. It's like, maybe they don't want to be a part of us. And so if they don't want to be a part of us, well, then, I don't know. I don't know, what's going on, and I don't know if I should reach out or not reach out or what I should do. And out of sight and out of mind, you don't even think, what's going on. And you're actually probably operating on an assumption that isn't even true, that could be simply resolved because of community and proximity of that community. See, people drift from their community of faith before they drift away from faith. So they begin to isolate themselves, and that faith community, I guess apparently they don't care about me, and so I'm going to isolate myself, and begin to isolate myself from God and those messages and the things that I get when I'm experiencing community, and pretty soon your faith begins to fade because you're not exercising it. And you're not exercising it with some other people along the way. So, providential relationships, staying connected to a community of faith grows our faith. It sets us up for providential relationships. And when we see God's faithfulness in someone else's life, it's easier to trust Jesus with our own, right? If this faith community didn't exist, I would have never met Ruth Brown. Never met her. And I would have been the worse for it. See, my faith was strengthened. My faith grew because I got to watch someone else go through something that was so extraordinarily difficult and watch the faith. It's because of this faith community that I've met Joanne Jurgens. I wouldn't have met her apart from this. And right now I'm watching her faith as she faces very difficult circumstances in her life. And just watching her and the faith that she has, I'm inspired by that. I'm like, man, I've already pre-decided. God, I have no idea health-wise what you have in mind for me, but I'm just pre-deciding I want to have faith like that. If that's what you decide for me. So when we see God's faithfulness in someone else's life, it's easier to trust Him with our own. So here's my question for you. Are you positioning yourself for God to bring someone into your life? Are you positioning yourself for God to bring someone into your life? And are you positioning yourself to be available for God to use in someone else's life? And let me ask you this. Those people that God has brought into your life in a providential way, have you ever gone back and thanked them? Have you ever gone back and said, man, you made an extraordinary impact on my life. God used you. Thank you for making yourself available that way. I would encourage you to go back and to thank them. I would encourage you to ask the question, is it on the forefront of my mind? When I get up every day, am I going to work asking God, would you use me in a providential way today? Have you ever asked that? Do you think if you would actually ask that and then you went through the day looking, that God would set you up with opportunities that, one, would scare you half to death, and if you stepped into it, would grow your faith? And the other person would be so, so thankful for you to do that. So Crossing, we structure everything that we do in this regard. And because we know the power of providential relationships. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. God, I thank you for the individuals that you have dropped into my life that have deeply impacted the direction of my life, impacted what I believed, impacted what God, I know to be true. God sometimes challenged me, sometimes, kind of got in my face a little bit. God, providentially, you have used so many individuals, and I am so grateful. God, you want to use every single one of us. So I pray that you would help us to position ourselves, to involve ourselves in the environments that the crossing has put in place and even outside of the crossing. That you would use us in providential ways in other people's lives. And help us to be open to that. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.